explained by the fact that the vaccine actually stimulates the body to produce the immune antibodies for the individual. Now, each of us varies in the ability that we have to produce antibodies, and there are some individuals who have up to 4 shots who are having some difficulty with polio. And I think it can be explained upon the fact that they have not in themselves produced enough antibodies for complete protection. Now, on the other hand, we are very pleased with the fact that most of these people who have had difficulty and who have had their shots up to 4, they're not having as much paralytic polio, even though it is up. The incidence of paralytic polio is up some 80-odd% over last year.
Some protection, then, is much better than no protection at all.
Oh, yes, very definitely. Well, there are essentially 3 reasons, one of which I just gave you as regards the individual ability to produce antibodies. The second reason is that there has always been a cyclic incidence of the disease. One year it'll be greater than the next year, or maybe they'll have 2 or 3 years that are pretty high in incidence, followed by one that we have a low incidence. However, the principal reason, I think, is a public apathy insofar as their desire to get their immunization. Actually, 1/3 of the children under 5 have had no vaccine whatsoever. Those in the 15-year to 39-year group, the incidence of immunization among this group is very low. And that's the principal reason, is that people have not taken the opportunity of taking care of themselves.
This morning we completed the appointments to the new Securities Commission by naming Paul Duncan as the attorney member, who was recommended by the State Bar Association and was also the court-appointed receiver in the selected investments case. He's quite qualified in the field of securities law, and I'm certain will do an excellent job. The banker member of the Securities Commission that we appointed is Arthur Foster, who is from Bristow, Oklahoma, and was recommended by the State Bankers Association and is presently a member of the Securities Commission, the old one, and was quite instrumental in the preparation of the new Securities Commission law.
I think it can be explained upon the fact that they have not, in themselves, produced enough antibodies for complete protection. Now, on the other hand, we are very pleased with the fact that most of these people who have had difficulty and who have had their shots up to 4, they're not having as much paralytic polio, even though it is up. The incidence of paralytic polio is up some 80-odd% over last year.
Some protection then is much better than no protection at all.
Oh yes, very definitely. Well, there are essentially 3 reasons, one of which I just gave you as regards the individual ability to produce antibodies. The second reason is that there has always been a cyclic incidence of the disease. One year it'll be greater than the next year, or maybe they'll have 2 or 3 years that are pretty high in incidence, followed by one that we have a low incidence. However, the principal reason, I think, is a public apathy insofar as their desire to get their immunizations.
State Liquor Control Board took steps today to nip whiskey price fixing in the bud and at the same time withdraw from the dispute over the regulation of private clubs. The board had learned that some distillers and out-of-state sellers of whiskey had been making contracts with prospective wholesalers, contracts which would fix the price of liquor and deny any wholesaler the right to buy if they didn't want to buy at the price stated in the contract. The board's opinion said that such contracts were in restraint of trade and were not in accord with the constitutions of either Oklahoma or the United States. The board threatened penal action against parties to such contracts. In the second instance, the Attorney General's office rendered an opinion on one of 20 or so requests by the board for an interpretation of the law. The board wanted to know if it has the power to govern the private clubs, which will be a central feature of Oklahoma's urban society in coming months. Assistant Attorney General Harry Johnson announced the opinion today.
We felt that the proposed ordinance was a police ordinance and was not under the jurisdiction of the ABC board.
Well, now, supposing that liquor were being sold there at these clubs as if it were a retail store, then the board would have the jurisdiction, is that right?
It would be of official concern of the board in that instance.
In other words, the board's authority stops when the bottle is sold by the retailer. It cannot legislate for the towns and cities which reserve the power to regulate what seems to be purely a police matter.
Mr. Mello, the United States hasn't launched any satellites in a good long while. Is there any particular reason for this?
Well, I don't know as you could give one reason. I believe that a lot has been accomplished through satellites, and probably they are spending their time on a little more aggressive effort than just satellites. We at the Missile Command have other satellites to be launched in our program. We are also concerned with the Saturn project and the Mercury project and the lunar probes and things like that. So there's just so much you can learn from these first efforts in satellites, and I imagine that they're just spending their efforts on the more advanced phases of our technology.
Mr. Mello, what do you feel is the next logical step in our space program?
Well, we've done a lot of probing, and we will do more, but I believe the next major step will be getting a man into outer space. This seems to be what we want to do, and space exploration is the step following that, of course.
How long do you think it'll be before we get a man into outer space?
Oh, Lord, there have been so many estimates. They say 1965, 69, 70. Who can say? We're getting closer and closer to the capability, though, and within the next very few short years, I'm sure you will see this done. And I mean very short period of time.
Well, Project Mercury, of course, has already picked the astronauts who will go up. Are they going to send them up there with a reasonable chance of their survival?
They won't send them until they know they can get them back. This is for sure. That's why we're doing all this testing. They're not going to take a chance with them.
I see. You know, a lot of people ask the question, just why do we want to put a man into outer space? What are we going to do when we get him out there?
Well, Werner von Braun was asked this one time, and he said just because it's there. And I think this is a pretty good answer. There are many reasons. There's so much we don't know about this wonderful world of ours, and this is one step in finding out. I think it's wonderful that we can. Of course, it has many uses in your field, in television. As a matter of fact, they find they might get better television transmission in outer space. There's less interference. Observation, knowing more about the weather. There are many things, and not all military.